bunker-buster bombs. The goal, as stated by American officials, was to cripple Iran's ability to develop a nuclear weapon, a concern that has worried the international community for years. Following the strikes, U.S. President Donald Trump made a bold announcement to the world. He declared the mission a spectacular military success, claiming that Iran's nuclear sites were now completely and totally obliterated. In his statement, President Trump issued a stern warning, saying that if Iran chose to retaliate, it would face even greater attacks from the United States. His strong words were meant to show American resolve and deter any response from Tehran. The president's message was clear. The United States would not allow Iran to possess nuclear weapons and was prepared to use significant military force to stop it. However, behind the president's confident words, there was a more careful tone from the Pentagon. Military officials described the facilities as severely damaged rather than completely destroyed. This suggests that while the strikes were powerful, their full effect is still being assessed. Other top officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, tried to clarify the mission's purpose. They emphasized that the goal was not to overthrow Iran's government but specifically to dismantle its nuclear program. They also stated that the United States was still open to returning to negotiations, signaling a possible path away from all-out war if Iran complies. Iran's response to the American attack was swift and filled with anger. The country's foreign minister immediately condemned the strikes, calling them a grave and unprecedented violation of international law and the United Nations Charter. He accused the United States of acting as an aggressor and promised that Iran would not let the attack go unanswered. Inside Iran, leaders worked to control the narrative, with state media initially downplaying the extent of the damage. They wanted to project an image of strength and resilience to their people and to the world, even as satellite photos began to show the significant destruction at the targeted sites. The most direct threat came from Iran's powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. This elite military force issued a stark warning, declaring that all U.S. military bases in the region were now considered vulnerable. This includes major American installations in neighboring countries like Iraq, Bahrain, and Qatar, where thousands of U.S. troops are stationed. The IRGC's statement was a clear signal that if the conflict escalates, these bases could become direct targets for Iranian missiles or drone attacks. This threat puts American service members on high alert and raises the risk of a direct military clash between the U.S. and Iran. In addition to threatening U.S. bases, Iran's parliament took a significant step by approving a measure to close the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is one of the most important sea lanes in the world, especially for oil shipments. While the parliament's vote sends a strong message, the final decision to actually close the strait rests with Iran's supreme leadership. Such a move would be a drastic escalation, as it would disrupt the global economy and would almost certainly provoke a strong military response from the United States and its allies, who have long pledged to keep the vital channel open for international trade. The ongoing conflict with Israel also intensified in the hours following the U.S. strikes. Iran has been engaged in hostilities with Israel for over a week, and it quickly retaliated for the new attack. Another large barrage of Iranian missiles was launched toward Israel, striking the cities of Haifa and Tel Aviv. These attacks injured more than 80 people and caused further fear and disruption. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded by vowing to continue his country's military campaign against Iran. This back-and-forth violence between Iran and Israel adds another dangerous layer to an already explosive situation, creating a multi-front crisis. The threat to the Strait of Hormuz has sent shockwaves through the global economy. This critical choke point is the pathway for over 20% of the world's daily oil supply, which amounts to about 21 million barrels of oil passing through every single day. If Iran were to follow through on its threat and close the strait, it would create a massive disruption in the global energy market. Experts predict that a full closure could cause oil prices to skyrocket, potentially rising above $120 per barrel. Such a dramatic price hike would lead to higher gas prices for consumers everywhere, and could trigger widespread inflation, hurting economies around the world. The economic fallout was felt almost immediately. Following the news of the U.S. strikes, global oil prices jumped by nearly 10%, with Brent crude, a key international benchmark, briefly rising above $80 a barrel. Stock markets also reacted nervously, with U.S. stock futures falling as investors worried about the potential for a wider conflict. The United States is now urging China, which buys approximately 90% of Iran's oil exports, to use its influence to pressure Tehran not to close the strait. The economic stability of many nations now hangs in the balance, depending on what happens next in this narrow stretch of water. World leaders and international organizations have reacted with deep concern. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting to address the crisis. The UN Secretary-General made an urgent plea for de-escalation, warning all sides to step back from a cycle of retaliation that could spiral into a devastating regional war. Key European allies of the United States, including the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, also urged restraint. While they share concerns about Iran's nuclear ambitions, they fear that the military strikes could lead to an uncontrollable escalation and have called for a return to diplomacy to resolve the tensions. Meanwhile, other major world powers have condemned the American attack. Both Russia and China, who have closer ties with Iran, criticized the U.S. strikes as a violation of international law that will only destabilize the region further. However, they too have called for a diplomatic solution, understanding that a major war in the Middle East would have negative consequences for the entire world. The lack of a unified international response highlights the deep divisions over how to handle the situation. While some support the U.S. action, many others fear that it has opened the door to a much larger and more dangerous conflict.